My name is Paul Friga, and today I'm going to talk to you about strategic planning, how to do it right. 3 topics for our talk. Number 1, the strategy content. Number 2, strategy process. And number 3, strategy examples. Let's start first with the strategy content. What is strategy? Some people roll their eyes when they hear the topic strategy, and for good reason. It's quite often not done well in organizations and has, in general, built up somewhat of a questionable reputation. To me, it's the most important thing you can do in your organization if you do it right. But what is it? First of all, the basic definition of strategy is an elaborate or systematic plan of action. And I'd like to emphasize the word action. As illustratively presented by Dilbert, is your plan consistent with our corporate strategy? How would I know? That's my Dilbert voice. Don't you know your strategy? No, do you? Of course I do. It's something about leveraging our platforms. Does your plan leverage our platforms? No, but I can rewrite my plan so that it seems as it does. Good, go back and do that. No point in having a strategy if you aren't going to pretend to follow it. That's the problem. Many people have stated strategies, but they don't affect action. So let's dig a little deeper. What is in the contents of strategy? What exactly is it? I've created a framework called Paul's 4 Ps to summarize it. First, it's position, then priorities, payments, and performance. By position, I mean the traditional strategy statements of mission, values, vision. Who are we? What do we offer that's unique? And where are we headed exactly? Once that's clarified, and I mean clarified and condensed to 1 page or less, I'd like to then move to priorities. What are the things we have to do to get that done? What's critical for success? What's our stretch BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals? And also, very importantly, what should we not do? Strategy should be used as a tool to say no to the wrong things for now. Then you move to payments, because strategy only happens if you back it up with resource allocations, people's time and money. How much do we have to spend? How do we allocate those resources? What budget process do we use? And then finally, performance. How do we track how well we're doing? Keeping it to a few strategic metrics and then having them cascading through the organization. Feeding back to positioning and strategy, you basically would redo your strategic plan about every 3 years, or unless there's a big shock to the system, new competitors, a major new technology, or some breakthrough that requires a reassessment. Let's go a little deeper into those core strategy statements. The mission statement is the key. Why are we here? What's our reason for being? What are our programs and plans directed to, and to whom? And how does whatever we're doing make us proud? That's my shortcut. Does it make you proud? Later we'll talk about how concise that has to be, but it has to be understood by everyone in the organization. Next is vision statement. Where are we going? What are we shooting for? What are we trying to become? What are we striving for? It should be specific, should be motivating, and you know what? It should make you excited. You come to work every day to work on that. And then there are the values, our guiding principles, how we interact with ourselves, with our customers, with other stakeholders. It makes you belong. Peter Drucker once wrote about the t-shirt theory. It should be so concise and easy to get your arms around that it could fit on a t-shirt. The only thing I will add is the mission should be on the front, the vision should be on the back, and the value should be on the sleeves. Then it'll feed other statements such as priorities, objectives, initiatives, and actions. So the strategy has to be very concise, has to be clear, it has to be communicated. In fact, I've written 3 questions for evaluating strategy. Is it clear? Is it concise? Is it communicated? Do people have it as easy recall? And is it aligned with higher level strategies? If you're in a higher ed institution, is it within a system? Does your strategy fit the system? And then does your strategy cascade down to the schools and to the units within the university? And does it address Paul's 4 Ps, position, priorities, payments, and performance? Ultimately, the goal of strategy is to guide daily decision making. How does someone make a decision if they don't know the strategy? They typically will rely on what's been done before, what's worked, what their personal objectives are. And in some cases that might work, but in others it might take you different directions. So the goal of strategy is to get to every person in your organization, make them proud of why they're here, excited about where they're going, and have clarity about each day's decision, especially about resource allocations, to be aligned to the strategy. That's the content of strategy. Now let's move to the strategy process. How do you do strategy in an organization? Well, it's not as complicated as many strategy professors would have you think. It basically boils down to internal and external analysis. And I believe you should start with external analysis. You should look outside of what's going on. You should look at customers, competitors. You should look at macro trends, technologies, political, economic situations. And then you should look to the internal analysis, mainly looking at your strengths and weaknesses, looking at your people and your capabilities, your technologies, your processes. So together, the external analysis, internal analysis will be used to craft the strategy. I take a methodology. I've done quite a few strategic planning projects in academic institutions. Here's one example for the UNC Chapel Hill College of Arts and Sciences. I set out, why are we here? What kind of process are we doing with strategic planning? We're to guide internal and external constituents. Internally, to guide decision-making, as I spoke before, and externally, to inform key constituents of our plan to ensure buy-in and support. Strategic planning also is important to the leaders of an organization. It sets the plan, typically for a 3 or a 4 or a 5-year period. 5 years are a little harder. 3 years are more concise for building out your initiatives. But it's also strategic thinking training for the leaders, and you get input from other key constituents. You should have a task force, no more than about 5 to 7, maybe a few more, but it gets difficult for scheduling and this is the people who are actually going to write the strategy. So you don't want to have too big a group. They understand, they review the data, they craft the drafts, and then you have craft the draft statements, and then you have an advisory committee who meets about 3 times over the process to give final feedback. Here's a framework I created, especially for academic institutions as they do strategic planning. Phase 1 is the heavy data. That's when you're going to do internal, external surveys. You'll do a lot of benchmark analysis. You'll do some interviews. The survey, by the way, would be all your faculty, staff, employees, and key constituents. And then you'll produce at the end of that stage a summarized and prioritized SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That's usually a month to 2 months, depending upon the size of the institution. Then you move to visioning. Visioning is when you actually craft the statements. By the way, if you're looking at the timeline here, that's because it started spreading over spring break and then spread into the beginning of summer. Visioning stretched out to, for the College of Arts and Sciences, there was a lot of groups who had to be involved. But the visioning statements is where it gets kind of fun. You get to craft the strategy statements, the mission, the values, the vision. Again, very concise, fitting to one page. The words are very important. And make sure the words are differentiated too. Make sure you capture the essence of your organization and you don't fall into the generic mission statements of just trying to be the best. You'll also identify key metrics for tracking success. And then that feeds into the implementation planning, where you'll craft out the objectives, initiatives, supporting metrics, and look at budget and ROI. That's also where you'll have the initiatives assigned to people to make sure that there will be follow through. So strategic planning is the big picture process of trying to achieve a strategic vision or having competitive advantage, which means you're having a higher performance than your peers over a sustained period of time. The tactics are the things I spoke to about objectives and initiatives. And then thinking means everybody in your organization has clarity and they're free to make decisions with strategy as a backdrop. A little more information about that SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. A great starting point for strategy. It's not your end all be all, but it's a nice way of organizing where you are today and where you could be moving to. It's a static analysis. The strengths and weaknesses are the internal analysis that captures your people and processes, as I mentioned before. What are the traits that we can leverage and we should leverage going forward? The external analysis is captured in the opportunities and threats, and this is outside of our control, but very important to affect strategy because we need to take advantage of things, connect things, and also watch out for certain things that may be coming our way. Here's a quick example of a SWOT from Carolina Athletics, a project I did for Bubba Cunningham at the University of North Carolina when he first came in and had to restructure all of our athletics from top to bottom. I won't go through it in great detail, but you can see we prioritized it to the top 3. And that took a lot of work, by the way, to compile all the data. And each of these had supporting slides. I believe strategic planning should be done with data. You want to take your time and have a lot of inputs, but then you have to prioritize because otherwise it could be way too many. I've seen SWOT analyses that would have 12, usually more strengths than weaknesses, of course, 12 to 15, and it's not helpful for action. So prioritizing to the ones that are the most important to your strategy. You'll have to make sure that each of these SWOT are addressed in your strategic plan when you're finished. The last part of my talk today is about strategy examples. What are we trying to produce? What do some deliverables look like? Let's start with that mission statement. I believe it has to be concise. It has to be special, not generic. Look at these two great examples. Southwest Airlines, we have fun. And you know, I went to Herb Kelleher a couple times. He came to Indiana University when I was a professor there. I said, really, we have fun? That's your mission statement? And he said, usually with cigarettes and a bourbon in his hand, he would say, yeah, as long as my employees are having a good time, everything will take care of itself. Now, there's more to it with their business model and their values and their safety and things like that, but that is a differentiator for them. And if you've ever flown Southwest, you know that to be true. It leads to trade-offs. Some like that and some don't, and that's important in differentiation. The MD Anderson Cancer Center at the University of Texas, world-renowned for curing cancer. Of course, they're a full-service hospital doing a lot more than that, but that's what the folks would tell you is their essence. We cure cancer. In fact, they've revised that recently to we make cancer history, which is very similar, but maybe just an advancement in terms of their progress. I'm definitely not going to go through all these other examples, but here are some for your future reading, from 3M all the way to Walt Disney. We make people happy. I even have McKinsey, my old firm, there to help leading corporations and governments be more successful. Why are you here? What's your purpose? Does it make you proud? Then you move to core values. Core values are the guiding principles for our interactions. And there are a lot of words tossed around. In fact, one of the problems I see with values is that people have just too many, and the people within the organization don't know which ones are truly the most important and truly valued. But here's a great example from the VA. Now, they have had issues executing against these, but their stated values are fantastic. And they're one of my clients, actually, through UNC Keenan Flagler. And we talk a lot about these values. I care. Great acronym, by the way. If you have more than 3, you got to slip into an acronym to help with recall. Integrity, compassion, accountability, respect, and excellence. Funny story here is I put the word accountability into my slide from memory, and then someone in a VA class, when I presented this to them, said, "Sir, that's actually advocacy." And somebody else said, "Well, maybe it should be accountability." So there was a big debate about it, but truly accountability is one of their priorities as of late. More value statements for you to consider, from Merck to Sony, back to Walt Disney, and Nordstrom, one of my favorite stores to shop. Service to customer above all else, and never being satisfied. Again, I have a general rule of 3. A few of these go more than that. I typically would say to prioritize it to 3, and then maybe use an acronym if it gets beyond 3. The vision statement, the thing that makes us excited, we're driving for it, we're shooting for in the future. GE to be number 1 or 2 in the market share in every sector. And that served them extremely well through the 80s and 90s. But you got to revise it. They actually used that because they were a conglomerate that had grown into too many businesses, and there was having a strain on margins. And this was a tool that Jack Welch used to prioritize and have the highest return on assets for 12 years straight. But then it started having demise because it didn't restate. So these things have to be revisited, and they have to come out with a new exciting vision afterwards. The last great not-for-profit, or one of the greatest ones, before this decade is out, this nation shall land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth. Of course, they did that in less than 10 years. And that was an exciting thing, that BHAG that people got behind, and led to all kinds of other great things. Now, more vision statements from Walmart. Sometimes they're very quantitative or even qualitative. You're shooting for something specifically. Stanford was going to become the Harvard of the West. They certainly exceeded that, and a number of these have been accomplished. Nike wanted to crush Adidas. Well, they crushed Adidas within about 10 years of that. So you can see that there are lots of different ways to do this, and there's no one right answer for you. I'd say be creative with it, be specific, be unique, and make sure that there's buy-in in your organization. Here's an example from athletics. Carolina, also in their setting within an academic institution, when they were confronted with all of their issues, they needed to prioritize the right things. So they came up with these statements. We educate and inspire through athletics. This was one of my favorite strategic planning projects. The vision will lead in all that we do. Academics first, athletics and administration. Values of RISE, responsibility, innovation, service, and excellence. And then the next words down, by the way, can really help you make it clear for people what you mean by those. And then they had 4 priorities. I pushed for 3. Bubba pushed back. But they did have these priorities. And I'll tell you what differentiated the most is the quantification within their priorities. Sometimes you do it there, sometimes you do it in the objectives or the initiatives. But they wanted to become a top 3, top 10. That became the mantra. top 3, top 10 in all that we do. They told every coach, you're going to be top 3, top 10 in academic achievement and athletic achievement. Top 3 in the conference, top 10 in the country. And if you're not there, let's figure out a plan to get you there. So that was very motivating, very specific. Of course, if you didn't hit it that year, that's fine. You just, strategies like going up and down escalator. You never quite get to it, but it's you're being on the right track, the right vector, and you're energetically going up the escalator as you go. As soon as you stop, by the way, you move backwards. So that's how important it is. A few more examples and we'll wrap up here. McKinsey, help clients make distinctive, lasting, substantial improvement performance. A firm that attracts, develops. Here's what their t-shirt says. Our clients get better and our people are great. And that's a shortcut. But then they have their values, clients, firm, staff, and it's in that exact order. Four Seasons, if you've ever stayed there, you know it's known for exceptional hospitality and quality. They're very picky about everything they do for discriminating customers. What we believe, how we behave, and how we succeed. And then my last example is Arizona State, the new American university. One of the best examples of an academic strategy under Michael Crow's leadership. There's a lot of words here. You can go into those deeper, but here's the way I summarize it. One of the most distinct pieces of their strategy is they're measured by not whom they exclude, but by whom they include. They've really shifted their business model. And to accomplish that, they've grown online significantly. They've built new competencies, new campuses, and all of that led to a bigger student base, which led to more resources, which has elevated the research and elevated the reputation. So these are all the details, but that point about their differentiation and the clarity by which they strive for customer, in this case, student output, student outcomes is fantastic.